Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Art 192, Digital Imaging with Photoshop for the spring semester 2022. What I wanted to do today is to go over lesson 3 quickly, which involves using how to use various tools to make selections and to isolate images from one photograph and then bring them into another. It's an important, they're important tools to learn and to master so that you can do not only the postcard assignment, but any assignment thereafter. Making selections and doing them accurately is really, really important. And there's a variety of ways that you can do that. So this is the finished piece that they show us. And what I want to do is I'm going to start with the start piece. And I'll show you, I'll zoom in here and show you different ways quickly of how to isolate these images from the background. Because if I take any one of these, let's take a rectangle tool, and I click and I drag from here, and I move it. I use the move tool, I move it. You'll notice that it leaves a blank hole there. If I were to, let's go ahead and deselect this and do it a little bit differently. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this layer because I never like working on my original layer. I'll turn it off. I'll do this again. And again, I'll make a selection of this using the rectangle tool. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the move tool to show you what happens. It functions like a little cookie cutter. You can see the little checkerboard behind it so that it floats. And then as soon as I hit Command D to deselect, it is fixed on that layer. So if I were to go back and say, oh, I made a mistake, I need to go ahead and select it again. So I'm going to go ahead and select it, and I'll just go ahead and select it and move it. Because it's on that one layer, when I select move, I get the same thing as I did before. I get another little cookie cutter effect. So that's also the importance of using layers, which is in addition to selections, which is a part of lesson 4. Okay, so let me undo a few steps. Let me deselect. Oops, cancel. There we go. That. I want to come back in here and undo. There we go. So fortunately, we have the ability these days to use the undo feature to get us back to our original. But it's, again, it's not surefire. So I want to try to instruct you in a variety of ways of working in a manner that is non-destructive. Let's put it that way. So first thing, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to select the sand dollar. And there's a variety of ways of doing that. The best way would be to either use the quick selection tool or the object selection tool. So to use the quick selection tool, I take and I just drag it inside the sand dollar. And you can see that what happens is I call them the marching ants, but I get a selection for that. And now what I can do is so that when I want to move it, I want to make sure that it's on its own layer, is that if I hit Command or Control J, it makes a copy of it and it puts it on its own layer. So now if I turn off the background copy, you can see that it's there by itself. So that's the ideal way to work. I like making a selection of the objects and then making sure that I hit Command J so that they each reside on their own layer. Another way to do that instead, which is a newer iteration, this is available recently, it's the object selection tool. So if I click and I drag diagonally in here, it'll go through its motions and I get the same results. So oftentimes these days, I'll start with the object selection tool. If it doesn't select everything that I want, then I move on. And you can also use all of these selection tools in combination with one another. Then I will probably then go back to the quick selection tool and add or subtract from the selection that I have. So I'm going to deselect that. Let's move on to the next one down here. So now we have a plate, and on the plate is some coral and some snail shells. We want to capture the whole plate. Again, there's a variety of ways of doing this. In the lesson plan or the textbook, they want you to click and select the elliptical marquee tool underneath the rectangle marquee tool. So a couple of ways to do this. What I like to do, and this, in some instances, you will need to do it this way. You don't for this, but it's helpful to show you how. If you want to make a selection, you click and you drag, and you can see that it's turning into an ellipse. If I hold down the Shift key, it is a perfect circle. If I hold down the Option key, it makes the circle, as well as the Shift key, it makes the circle from the center outward. You can see that. Then if I also hold down the space bar while I'm doing that, I can move it into position and move it in the center. Okay. Let go of the space bar and then click and continue to click and drag. And you can see it's not a perfect circle. So I'll let go of the Shift key. And then I'm going to go ahead and think I found pretty darn close to the middle of it. And you want to make sure that the selection is just inside the shape. You let go of the mouse first, and then you let go of the Option key. Now, if I want to move this around before it's been put in place, I can also go ahead and I can use my arrow keys in the lower right-hand corner of the keyboard. So with the selection intact, I'll go ahead and hit Command J again. And again, it puts it on its own layer. And to prove that, I can go ahead and use the Move tool up here. And you can see I have an exact copy of it. The next one involves a couple of different tools. You can always start by trying to select, if I move up to the Object Selection tool, that would probably be your best bet. Okay. See, I have the wrong layer selected. So I'll click OK. Make sure that I have the background layer selected, because if there are no pixels on the new layer for it to select, then it doesn't know what to do. So I'll make sure that I have the background layer selected. And I'm going to be adding to this. And then I click and I drag around it. And before you know it, it's going to recognize that selection inside. And it does a really super job. It's better than going around with the freeform selection tool or any of the other tools. In the textbook, though, what they do is they show you how you can combine these tools. So what I'm going to do is, instead of the ellipse tool, I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to make a selection all the way around, just as I did with the object selection tool. And then underneath the object selection tool, there's also something called a magic wand. It works really good for areas where there are solid color pixels, like the white background. So what I want to do is I want to remove all of these pixels from the white pixels from my selection. So if I hold down the Option or Alt key and I click, I get the same results. But this is a two-step process now. In some instances, it will be the way to go. This lesson has not changed for several versions of Adobe Photoshop, but for the object selection tool, it was recently added. So again, just be familiar with them. So I'll go ahead and hit Command J, to, again, make another copy of it. Again, we have another one up here. We have the Nautilus shell. Now you can try, again, it's always worthwhile trying and going and selecting the object selection tool and clicking and dragging over it. See if it, see, I forgot to go back to the background layer. Got to remember to do that. Go back again, click and drag, and see what it does. And it does a perfect job. It recognizes the difference between the pixels and the Nautilus shell and the background. But there is another tool that they want us to use in place of this. So I will zoom in a little bit and show you how it works. It is, I'm going to go ahead and select underneath the lasso tool. I'm going to select the magnetic lasso tool here. I'm going to move my face over here a little bit. And you can start anywhere. But what you do, and I prefer to see the crosshairs instead of this little icon. So if I put caps lock on, you'll see that I can see the range of pixels, and I can click now and I can move across. And as I'm going around clockwise, I can go ahead, and if I mess up a little bit, I'm going to have to wait and come back and fix it. You'll see that I got a few more pixels than I had intended. And I might do that by accident again, and we'll have to come back and fix that. Now, if the smart or object selection tool doesn't work, this in the future may be a direction that you have to go. But because it does, you would probably not need to. So I'm trying to go around this quickly, get to that point, and then drag around. Now you can, if you move really slowly and follow the silhouette, it will automatically make those anchor points for you. But you can see my hand-eye coordination isn't that great. And there's a couple of places that I made a mistake. Now, when you get back to your point of origin, the icon comes back for the tool, and in the lower right-hand corner is a little circle. And that means that when you click, it will complete that and make a selection. So now what you have to do is you have to go around and decide whether you're going to add to the selection or you're going to subtract from. So let's zoom in here. And I'm going to look in the upper right-hand corner. And what I want to do is I want to subtract this from the selection. So I'm going to switch from the magnetic lasso tool to the lasso tool. To use these in combination with one another, you need to either hold down the Shift key, which will enable you to add to the selection, or you need to hold down the Alt or Option key, depending on whether you're on the Mac or the PC, to remove from the selection. Well, I want to remove these pixels from the selection. So I'm on a Mac, I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm going to click and drag with that lasso tool and try to get as close to the edge as possible. And then I want to grab all of these pixels around the outside. And you can see that it removed that selection. Likewise, over here, you'll see that I need to add to my selection. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to drag along the edge again, and then select all these pixels on the inside, and I'll add to the selection. And I might go ahead and just grab a little bit more. There we go. And then the big one down here. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag. And I could probably also use the quick selection tool, and you do it in the same fashion. But again, it's just showing you all the tools that are available here for making selections. So now I click and I drag on the inside, and I've added those pixels. Okay, so if you were working on your own for the Mask assignment, your go-to tool is going to be the object selection tool. And if it doesn't complete the action for you, then what you'll need to do is use the quick selection tool for the rest. Get rid of that. I'm trying to fix this a little bit. And so I'll hold down the shift key. I'm going to add a few pixels here. Added a few. Added a few. You generally need to be really accurate with your selections, especially when you're combining those elements with other images, because you will see the difference. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out of this now that I've selected that. Make sure that I have the background image selected, and I do, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Command J. Whoops, come on. Command J. There we go. So I have this one too. And again, with this layer selected, if I get the move tool, we'll see how accurately I made my selection. And it's okay. It's not perfect. The last one that they want us to make, or there's two of them. Again, they recommend for this mussel shell using the lasso tool, but my hand coordination has never been that good to accurately drag around it. But for small areas, it works just fine. Instead, what I would choose to use is the Polygonal lasso tool. And what I can do is I can click, get close to it. Let me zoom in better here. I can click in here, move the mouse just a little bit and click again. And again, you have to go all the way around the shape, either in a clockwise or clockwise fashion in order to select the entire shape. So I'm just moving around slowly. I'm trying to get as close to the inside of the edge as possible. And again, because I'm doing this for you, I'm going a little bit quicker. And again, I would not probably use this tool for this particular selection, but it's important for you to practice at least once or twice and using it so that in the future, if it is your go-to tool for making a selection, then you'll feel somewhat comfortable with it. It's not an ideal. See how I made a glitch there? So I'll go around selecting these. And I'm going inside just a little bit, probably more than I need to. Because it will be somewhat accurate, but not perfect. So I'm going around the perimeter, just inside it. And clicking on here until I get back to the point of origin. And the same will hold true that when I get back to the original point up here to the top, I'm going to get the little icon will come back. There you go, with a little circle in the lower right-hand corner, and I've made that selection. Now, if I want to expand the selection, I can. If I want to move the selection a little bit with my arrow keys, I can. And that works pretty well for me. It's not perfect, but it's a good selection. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have the background layer selected, hit Command J, and make a copy of it. To show you an example of what happens when you don't select the right pixels, I'm going to show you that for the screw here. So again, since this is a perfect circle, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the ellipse tool. And I'm going to move it towards the center. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key. I'm going to hold down the Option key. Try to get it centered up, but I'm going to get just for the heck of it, I'm going to grab a few extra pixels here. Okay. Now I'm going to hit Command J. Whoops, gotta make sure the background is selected. Command J, and I'm going to move it. And you'll see right away that I've grabbed too many pixels here, and it's not a clean selection. See how I have way too many? I just want the screw, and that's it. So the best thing to do is to go back, deselect, and start again. It's worthwhile, you know, like I said, let's try and let's see what the object selection tool does. And I'll click and drag around that area and see what it does. And it's not half bad, but again, it's a little bit too big. I don't want, I just want the screw. I don't want the little indentation. So this would be an instance where the object selection tool and the quick selection tool aren't going to work for you. So I'll go ahead and I'll hold down the Option key. Come on, I'm going to go ahead and hold down the ellipse. Make sure that I'm on the background layer. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, so make sure that you can see as well. I'm going to hold down the Option key, the Shift key, or Alt key, as I said, if you're on the PC. Try to find the center as best I can. Move it outward. And if it needs to be adjusted, hold down the space bar. Move your mouse to get it centered. When it's centered, release the space bar and then release your mouse before you release the Shift and the Option key. And now I can go ahead and I can hit Command J, put it on a new layer. And I can move all of these into position now. So I can always go back to layer 1 and I can move it in place just using the Move tool. Boom, move it in place. I can go ahead and then select layer 2. And by doing it this way, I've kept all of the original images intact. I can always go back, and that's the importance of working non-destructively. You can always go back in the event that you made a mistake. And I do make mistakes from time to time. I make lots of mistakes. So we'll move that into position. We'll move this one into position. And we'll move this one into position. And you can see that this one needs to be rotated. So how do you rotate it? We have what is called the Free Transform tool. That can be found under the Edit menu. And if I select Free Transform, the key command for that is Command T. You get a little dialog box here. It pops up, and then or a little selection box, I should say. If you move over just outside one of the corners, you can see that it allows me to rotate. If I want to rotate it exactly 45 or 90 degrees, hold down the Shift key. If you want it to free rotate, then just click and drag outside until you get something that matches. Move it into position. Move it back a little bit because it might not be exactly 90-degree rotation. And you're set to go. Then the only thing that you need to do is click the little checkbox up here or hit your return key, and it's in position. And because it's on its own layer, we can always go back and move it anywhere we want. Okay. The last thing is to do the screw. So, or no, it's not. What else do I have here? What is this one? I thought that, there we go. There's a screw. Or is it this one? This one is a better choice. So what I would choose to do, I'm going to get rid of this one. And I'm going to use this one instead. So anytime you need to make copies of these, initially I would resize it, put it on its own layer, or it's already on its own layer, resize it, and then I would make copies of it so that they all work independently of one another. So as I did with the muscle, I can hit Command T, and I want to make it smaller from the center, and I want to make sure that I constrain proportions. Because if you don't, notice that you can really distort images. So that's the importance of holding down the Shift key. And again, if you want it to resize from the center, I hold down the Option or Alt key as well. And then if I want to rotate it, I can rotate it just a little bit. Now what I can do is when I'm done with that, I'm just going to go ahead and make a copy of that layer. So with that layer selected, hit Command J. Then I can go ahead now and with the Move tool, let's go ahead and move it and hold down the Shift key. And you'll notice that the smart guides are helping me here, making sure that it's in perfect alignment with the other one. And now I can hit Command J again and make another copy of it. And again, holding down the Shift key, and it's in perfect alignment. Again, whoa, there we go. Hit Command J again, make another copy. And if you want to rotate these so that they're slightly different, select the layer, hit Command T, and rotate them slightly. Now I can go ahead and hold down the Shift key again, move it over. Let's move this over, hold down the Shift key, and move it into position. And notice that when I get it in alignment with the other one as well, at the top, I get those little pink lines. So now it's aligned both with the top screw and the one on the right. And I'm set to go. The last step that they want us to do in here is to practice using the crop tool. And if you recall from lesson 2, I said when you crop, make sure that where it says delete crop pixels is left unchecked. So now what I can do is I can, with the crop tool selected, I can move this up like so. And let's leave the same amount all the way around. And I can hit the checkbox. And then what I want to do is I want to get rid of this top part here. So I'll just use the rectangular selection tool. Like so. And I'm going to select it. Whoops. Move this down. And then I can go ahead and just hit delete. Let's make this the foreground color. Make white the foreground color and hit Option delete. And there I've gotten rid of that. Now, to demonstrate to you how it's important not to crop pixels is that if, at any time, if I wanted to bring back all of those objects at the bottom, I would just have to select the crop tool and click and drag, and you can see how I can bring it all back. Memory is cheap these days. It's not really critical to be that conscientious about the amount of memory that you use. So for myself, I would choose to make sure that I leave all of these images intact. And also a benefit to having them on different layers, and we'll get to this in later lessons, is that I can add layer effects to any of these. So if I go all the way back up to the top, and let's say I wanted to add a drop shadow to that. With that layer selected, I can select effects at the bottom, and I can add a drop shadow. A little dialog box pops up. And now I can control the opacity. We'll make it, a little bit darker, maybe 75%. I'm going to control the direction of it. And we'll move it over like so. So it's going from left to right. And then I want to change the spread of it a little bit and the distance, like so. And it depends. Do you want a soft shadow? You want a harsh shadow? And they already added shadows for us in here. Change the size. If I change the spread and I change the size, there we go, just a little bit, maybe a few pixels. Move the spread like so. And the same with the distance. Come back, I have it set to 0. But I want it off a little bit, change the spread, change the size. And I have a nice drop shadow. And there's lots of other effects layers that are available as well. And what makes it nice with these is that you'll notice that as soon as I click OK, even before, you can see that I have an effect layer, an effect that is attached to that layer, and I can always turn it off. And if I add other effects in addition to that layer, they will be listed below too. So again, I'm working non-destructively. That's the importance of these. So what I'm going to do on Monday is I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. And I'm going to show you a different way of making a selection that's a little bit more refined, because it would be if you have, really soft individual hair elements, for example, pieces of hair or fur on an animal or things like that. You want to get all those subtle little nuances all the way around, kind of like what I did with my dog Bagel for the assignment that I showed you how to start with a postcard. Well, I'm going to show you how I would select her in the next lesson. So that's pretty much it for today. It's a really, as I said, it's a quick approach, but selections are really important to learn to use all the tools, to do them accurately. And make sure that when you do make a selection, hit Command or Control J, put it on a new layer. And then later on, if you need to collapse it to another, you can do that. But for the time being, if you can keep them on separate layers, it's a good way of working non-destructively. Okay. Are there any questions from you? Do you need any help with your projects, your lessons, or whatever? No? I've already done this lesson several times, and it's recorded for you from previous semesters. Maybe do it a little bit differently. Okay. Then use the lesson. If you're still waiting for your book, then you have the lesson files available to you in our shared Google Drive folder. Use those, and then use the recording that I will make available to you to do this yourself. Okay. Okay. So if that's it, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to pause the recording. And